Hello, welcome to the Ywk Podcast. My name's Olly.
I'm Becky.
And this is a podcast aimed at anyone who does youth or children's work, employed or volunteer. And it's kind of us thinking about and sharing our experience over quite a few years of engaging in church, children and youth ministry. And this is our 11th episode and it's all about volunteers. And yeah, I think that's a fairly universal thing. No church ever anywhere has said, yeah, I think we've got enough volunteers, or volunteers is not a struggle for us. Churches love volunteers. Basically, most of the work is done by volunteers and we never feel like we've got enough. If you're an employed youth worker or children's worker, you never feel like your team's too big, or I don't know anyone who's ever felt that. And if, I don't know, as being a volunteer too, I've never felt, oh yeah, there's not enough work for me to do. So it's been interesting to talk about and explore together. So first thing probably is recruitment. What have you got any thoughts, Becky, on what it takes to recruit a decent, strong team?
I think first things first is probably the best thing is to be prepared. So to know what you want, what kind of person are you looking for? What qualities are you looking for in that person? How many people do you need? Are you trying to recruit a whole team for a new activity or event you're trying to run? Is it, a one-off thing, or is it going to be a regular thing? Because I think the best thing is to be clear up front with people so that they know what commitment is being asked of them and what commitment you're asking. So it's not sort of airy-fairy and sort of up for interpretation, but you're being clear with people, that you want them every week on a Tuesday, term time only or whatever, or, that you want them, there's going to be a rota and actually you're trying to recruit twice as many volunteers as you need so that people don't need to be there every week. And also, how long for? So, do you want those volunteers to sign up for a year? Or is it, a project that is just going to be a one-off event? And what is it exactly that you want them to do while they're there? Are they going to be expected to lead stuff? Or are they just going to be assisting? Are there particular skills that you want them to bring? Are you looking for somebody who can play guitar or lead worship, or who can do craft stuff? Or, what kind of people are you looking for? And I think if you can, the more detail and stuff you can identify at the beginning, the more you can sort of do a pitch to people to say, this is what we're looking for. And even, in some of those conversations with people face to face, you can say why you think that person is going to be good for it, because then it's really personal. It's a personal ask. And I think they're more likely to say, and my experience is they're more likely to say yes, if they have that kind of personal ask and they know that you want them for it, not just anybody, but you think they're going to be good for the role that you're looking for.
That has another side to it as well, because actually they then are good for the role you're looking for. And I think there is something to be said for a kind of appeal from the front for particular things, but you do then put yourself in an awkward situation if there's somebody who you just think it's not you, like I think in some senses it's better to have the right person in a volunteer role, doing something that they are passionate about and they will be really good at, or at least has the desire to kind of grow in, rather than any old person. In some senses, we're like, beggars can't be choosers. But I think if you ask people individually, I know that's been best for me, because I thought, these guys will be great. I would love to have them on my team, but they're really, really busy, or I don't know if they'd want to do it. But just asking the question. And with that sense of clarity, I think it's helpful for us, but it's also much more appealing if you're a volunteer to be like, this parametered thing is what I'm committing to. And here's why. I think it's really important to keep your vision solid, and so people know what they're doing and why they're doing it. Someone was saying to me the other day, like generations have shifted. In the old days, people in church would be like, a job needs doing, I'll do it. Whereas now, younger kind of generations are much more like, why does this need doing? and can I get behind it, and therefore I'll do it. So I think we're more precious about our time. We don't just want to fulfill a function, we want to do something that's useful. So having a vision, this particular group is for this, and this is what it looks like. And my best teams have been where I've essentially handpicked people and been like, you would be really good at this particular thing, please can you do it?
I think just going back to what you said before about those kind of blanket asks, I guess, in a notice sheet, or from the front in notices in church, when we just ask for volunteers like that and don't follow it up with any kind of personal conversations or personal asks, like it can be a bit risky, because like I said before, like you might have in mind the kind of person and qualities and stuff that you want. In our last podcast, we talked about what makes a good leader, and we're looking for, good leaders are people who are going to set a good example, who are going to have certain qualities and stuff that young people can look up to and aspire to. You might get somebody come forward to volunteer who totally is not that, and you kind of need to have a backup plan of how you're going to say that person isn't suitable. And I guess as well, on top of that, there might be all sorts of different criteria that your church requires of people who are going to volunteer with kids and youth. Like, as clear as you can be with people up front in terms of what you're looking for and who you're looking for, people can sort of hopefully engage from your initial communication whether they are the right person or not for it. But also, I'd say, like, I've found it better to kind of pray for wisdom and pray for who God wants in those roles that I'm looking for, and ask him who I should be asking. So go to people directly and say, hey, George, I think you'd be great for this volunteer role. Would you be up for coming and volunteering? Partly because direct asks are more likely to get a response back. Like, that person either has to say yes or no. So they're going to have to go away and consider whether or not they think that they can or they are right for the role. So you're sort of presenting people with a direct opportunity to get involved or not. Obviously they can come back and say, actually, no, like, I haven't got the time, or I don't think it's right, or I've got too many other commitments. But at the same time, they're probably more likely to say yes, because you've done a direct ask and because you've said why you think they're going to be good for it, which kind of hopefully is enticing them and selling the vision for why you want them to be there and why you think it should be them. So that all of that helps with recruitment.
Yeah, and I think, and at the same, like, all of that being said, we have to, like you were talking about, pray, and we have to allow God to open our eyes to, because we're never going to get the perfect person, otherwise we wouldn't be there. And they're allowing God to open our eyes to see potential, or see what we hadn't seen because of prejudices, or there's always going to be people who in a church who we naturally click with and who we don't naturally click with, and that isn't necessarily the parameters for a good team. Probably a good team has a range of different personality types, different kind of strengths and weaknesses, and I certainly need God to help me out with that, because otherwise I'd just pick a whole load of people who are a bit like me, who I find fun, and that'd be that, and it wouldn't be a great team because it would just be a load of people like me.
Totally. I think as well, like, when we just rely on that blanket ask to people, sometimes within churches, I've seen it with older people, like, they think they're not right for it because, like, they're out of touch, or they haven't been involved in youth work for a really long time, and things have moved on and culture's moved on, and will they be the sort of people that young people want around, leading a kids or youth activity? And I've found it a lot harder to recruit for youth stuff than kids stuff. I think because it just seems that next step up, and maybe there'll be a bit more difficult topics to that might come up. Maybe there'll be worse behavior that we'll have to deal with, and so sometimes people shy away from coming forward to volunteer for youth stuff, when actually, when you ask them directly and you say, actually, I think you can do this, and you're the kind of person that we're looking for, and this is why, like you break some of those barriers down that perhaps they would have had to come forward themselves. So that can be really helpful as well.
And people are busy, and so you've done some of the pre-thinking for them. Obviously, all of us in our culture are busy, but as if you're an employed worker, you've done the pre-thinking that your potential volunteer doesn't have time to do. You've done that as a service for them, and they could now, they can discount that and be like, actually, no. But at least you've said, I know you, I know who you are, and within that context, I think you would be really great. For these reasons, but no pressure. I think would be really good. So once we've got people on team, assuming that all goes well, what about kind of supporting them and keeping them? Because in my experience, actually having consistent leaders is a really important part of the ministry. I think if you have people flitting in and out, that can have some strengths. But actually consistency over the years is something that's been really important to our ministry. But what do we do if we want to keep people and help them feel valued and supported?
Give people the opportunity to sign up for as much as they are willing to, rather than just expect them to be at everything. I think is one of the things. So it's about expectations, both from our expectation of what we want from people, being clear about that, but also like enabling the volunteer to share those same expectations rather than being different. And also, I guess, it's being aware. Part of that is being aware, of like the time commitments and the lives of volunteers. Like they might have families and jobs and other commitments that they have in their week, and this is like an extra thing that they're doing. So, it's being aware of that as part of that, and not just expecting them to be, to be at everything every week.
Yeah, and you're the gatekeeper of like your expectations. Like all of us, if we're passionate about ministries, will, and volunteered or paid, the people who are supporting the ministries that we're passionate about will always want more, and will want to be doing more. And we're the gatekeepers of what's a fair expectation of the person, because if we're just all needy all the time and like, oh, there's this, and that people will feel guilty about not, and that's not fair. That they've committed to do a particular thing, and it's up to us to make sure, people may want to do more, but it's their call to say, I've got more I want to give. I think, whereas it's just being very careful about, oh, this would be so great if only there were more people, just makes people feel undervalued. It makes them feel like they're not doing enough, when really they are. If you've been clear about what you're asking them to do from the start, I think that's an important role if you're leading and heading up a team, is to safeguard their commitments and say, no, thank you, I know that you would do that for me, but it's okay. Some things might not get done, and that's okay.
And I think sometimes we have to be the person. I've had this situation before where we have let volunteers volunteer for more than one team within the youth work. So we had like lots of different activities running, and there was a couple of volunteers who wanted to do everything and were happy to do everything, because their situation was that they had more time. But then in amongst that, like you have to be the one as the team leader to protect them. So sometimes what they want to do is not necessarily what is best for them to do. And they need to have a life outside of the ministry, in the same way as you wouldn't expect somebody who's being paid for X amount of hours to do way above those hours. With staff, we're quite clear about hours and breaks and all those kind of things, and we have to be the same with volunteers. And sometimes even if people are willing to do every week or multiple times a week every week for X amount of days, like there has to be periods where they're not expected to be there and they can have a break, or you choose to stop the activity during school holidays or those kind of things, to make sure that people have breaks and are getting the rest they need. And and bringing energy to the activity and stuff every time that it does happen, but not at the stage where they're burning out or they're regretting signing up for being a volunteer in the first place.
And actually, I had that pointed out to me. Just little simple things like if you do a training thing, obviously, if either you're paid or you're putting more time into it, and you're the team leader, like you've got the time to go to the training and run the group the next night, because for me that's my job. So, it's work time. But if you're volunteering and you've got a really busy life, actually, if the person leading it up says, right, we've done training this week, there's no youth group next week, and that's okay. The youth work's not going to fall apart. Actually, the youth work will fall apart, or the children's work will fall apart if you're undervalued, overworked volunteer team all burn out. That's much more dangerous than missing a week, so that people can have a week off and just be at home or do whatever. And I think early days as well, I've certainly done this. You look at a thing, you look at a youth group or a children's group or something, you think, it's only an hour and a half. I could do a couple of those. What's the big deal? But actually, as people who are more experienced, the group run time is an hour and a half, but you've got the debriefs, you've got the fact that you're emotionally exhausted because some stuff's coming up, or you've just putting yourself out there. It feels like it's more of a commitment than people realize. And we know that. So in early days, just holding people back a little bit and saying, try this out. We also, it never happens, but we also have a trial period. So we talked about times of commitment. For our different groups, we say we'd like you to commit for a year, excluding that's just roughly what the commitment is. Obviously, the people are volunteering; they can bail whenever they want, but that's the expectation. But having that very clear expectation. This is for a year, but we then have a trial period of a month, so that once you've committed to something, you're not like, oh no, this is
signed
not
up for life.
It was, and so you can easily both ways say, do you know what, this isn't right. And you haven't, just because you've done one night, you're not then committed for a whole year. And I think that makes it less scary, and also helps people to be more involved. Like, I've made this choice, I want to be here.
I think as well, like allowing people to have a taster of the activity, like if they're really not sure whether they want to volunteer or not. I've invited people along before as a guest just to see how it happens and see what it's like to be there, which gives them a really good idea of what that will be like and stuff. Which is good.
And I'd probably say, as team leaders, depending on what your circumstances are, to take as much of the weight off your team as you possibly can, to try and we make plans. I make plans for our team. We try and do leaders training so that people feel more confident. Try and make sure that you do some of the legwork so that when people come, they can give their best to what they're doing and not feel they have to do lots of stuff that's going to tire them out and isn't what it is. But that really depends on, again, it's about being clear. Here is the level of support I can offer as the team leader. That's what it is, and making sure that you're not just expecting people to carry the whole ministry because they've signed up for once a week.
I think another important part of it as well is like equipping the volunteers for the role that you've asked them to do. So like that might be internal training stuff that you're going to run at the beginning, if you're starting something new, or like helping them to catch on with the vision and keep that vision. So having reminders or days away as a team once a year, or at the start of term, instead of having that youth club or that kids club, having a team meeting instead, where you're going to go over what's expected, or get their input for what's coming up in the term, and help them to pray for the young people. And part of it as well as safeguarding, as a church you might run your own course, or you might have one that you signpost. And, you know, the importance of debriefing after activities and having team meetings to plan stuff together so that people feel like a part of it, not that it's all being, decisions are all being made outside of their control, but that they're inputting into it and they're a part of it. I think that all helps with retention.
Yeah, and it's a ministry that you share as a team, rather than all the volunteers just being little minions of yours that are basically doing what you don't have time to do. That's really unhealthy, and it can sometimes feel like that if we feel like, oh, I've just got to do this, give that job to that person, that job to this person. But actually, if it's a team, it's a team ministry. You might be the team leader, but we all hold and share the same vision, and we're all trying to do the same thing, and we're all individuals and we're all different, and we're bringing strengths and weaknesses into that and working together. And I think that's an important dynamic to keep hold of. So those team meetings and those team social times become even more important, because it's not just getting a living person to fill DBS quotas or stack chairs or be at this thing. It's actually, I want you to be part of this ministry with me, if you have the same vision, if you have a vision for it and it's something God's put on your heart. I think that's the best.
And I think that ties into cultivating the team, doesn't it? Like making sure that we allow the leaders within the team, the volunteers, to grow and learn and use their skills as well. And perhaps that sometimes if someone comes in who's got a different skill that you're not utilizing, you know, being aware and getting to know those team members and maybe making new opportunities for them to share that skill or that gift within the group by maybe providing an extra opportunity where there wasn't one before. And, you know, encouraging them to do it, because sometimes we think, oh, you know, they haven't come forward and said they want to lead worship, or they want to, you know, teach or pass on this craft skill or whatever it is that they've got, or they want to have a go at leading the session. Sometimes people don't come forward for those things until you say, hey, have you thought about giving this a go? So actually, as the leader of the activity, we need to be the one who kind of looks out for that stuff, and gives people responsibility and ownership in those kind of ways as well. And then obviously, making sure that we're building community within the team so that team members are getting to know each other, whether that's, you know, inviting everybody to the pub after the session or and doing a debrief there, or, you know, like once a year or once a term you get together as a team and do something fun. And it doesn't always have to be like a team meeting or something that's sort of official. It can be something that, you know, you invite people to, or a way that you sort of bless them and thank them for their role, and kind of combine that into one.
And make it nice. I think team socials that are literally just to bless them, whether that's you buy some nice bottles of wine on the Ywk budget, or you know, if you pay for it yourself, depends on your own budget. And you know, we once a year, not during the pandemic, we had people round, or the whole youth team round, for a barbecue at our house. And like, it's great, because I really like and respect everyone who's on the team. They're into youth work, so they're fun to hang out with, and it's good to talk with them, and it's just a nice way to show. And I don't think we should feel bad about that. Again, I think, you know, if you don't have capacity for that, take a week off running groups and do that together, because it's important. It's important for the ministry. It's an important part of what you're doing, that the team know and love each other. And I think also respecting and allowing space for disagreement is really important. So, you know, I'd much rather my team were able to say to me, you know, this thing that we've been doing for the last 5 years, I'm not sure why we do it, or is it working? And that can sometimes be a bit annoying, but actually being able to hear that, and there's so many good things. I mean, I just met recently with a leader, and we chatted about the language that's used in some of the plans and the way we talk. And I'm so glad that they brought that up with me and didn't feel like they just had to toe a line or kind of be subvert, but actually just Yeah, fair enough. Actually, that's interesting. That's not how I saw it, but I'm glad you're on the team and you see it and pick it up for us.
Yeah.
Allowing that space to reshape things, and I'm really proud that there are people on our team who hold passionately to what we're doing. And so if I ever try and bring up any change, they're like, no, and I like that, because it's not my ministry that they're doing, it's our ministry that we're doing together.
Yeah, and I think people, they want to feel valued, and that's what helps them stick around longer. So if you show that you value their opinion and their perspective and stuff, and that you value them as people by, encouraging them and helping them be better at their roles, and they're much more likely to stick around for longer. Yeah, that's what I think.
That's all the golden stuff.
Yeah.
And if you've got any thoughts on what about if it all goes wrong? What if there are, some disasters, either there's a big bust up or there's a leader who's just not right for all that you want them to be. They're just setting a bad example, or they just don't, they're not fitting, it's not working, or you have big disagreements, or people not liking each other. What are some of the...
I think this is where like the relationship with your volunteers is really key. It's like if you haven't made an effort to build that and to cultivate that, then the tough conversations can be even tougher because it kind of feels like out of the blue. And I mean, you don't want it to come across in a really negative way so that people resign from their volunteer role. Unless that's what you're asking them to do in those severe situations. But yeah, I think, sometimes it can be volunteers set a really bad example, or they've said or done something that actually they should know better on. Sometimes we just need to, after the session, after everybody else has gone, have a conversation with that one volunteer. I think we have to be careful about, shaming people in front of other people, because that can be really negative as well. And sometimes like some of those behavioral things might come out in conversation anyway, in the debrief, like where you talk about stuff that hasn't gone well in the club, and they might bring up themselves that actually they struggled to tell somebody off, or they lost their temper, or this thing happened and they didn't really know how to deal with it. Like those can open the door to discuss it. But sometimes you have to have a separate conversation with somebody about something where you say, actually, like what you did or what you said wasn't the best and could have been done better. And that all is within that context of actually that you value them, that you want to help them be better at their role, not that you want to shame them or just pick up the things they're bad at. You want to balance it with the things that they're good at, and that you still want them to be part of the team, but in future they could do it this way instead. And I think we should expect the same from volunteers to us, I think, as well. Like actually if we're gonna bring people up on mistakes they've made or things they could have done better, we have to expect the same from them. If we've messed up or we've done something wrong, we have to accept that criticism as well. And I think sometimes, it's those when things go wrong scenarios are, the volunteers have said they're going to come and they never turn up. There has to be a point where you bring that up with them and say, we're expecting you on Tuesday. Where were you, kind of thing. And those conversations can be awkward.
I hate that. I'm massively conflict averse, and so I hate those conversations. And I've had that before. One time I just let a volunteer sort of disappear. They kept saying they were going to come and I just knew they weren't, so I planned for that. And that's not the right way to deal with it, I don't think. I think it's not respecting them. It's good to say, this is the commitment. Do you want to do this anymore, or actually do you want to stop? Letting people make an active choice rather than just fizzle out.
Totally. And I think sometimes that comes back to the expectations thing. Like if you haven't been clear with somebody about how you want them to let you know, like if they're not going to be able to make it, or if they can't make it, are they supposed to find their own cover? If they're on a rota, do they need to switch with somebody for next week, and actually that's how they sort it out? Or I guess you need to have made it clear. This is why the expectations thing up front is really clear, because you don't want them just to not turn up, because if everybody didn't turn up, then technically you can't have the youth club or the kids club, because you haven't got the volunteers to manage it properly. And so setting those expectations really early on are really important when people don't follow them. The issue is actually the expectations differ. So like your expectation is very different to what their expectation is, and they don't think they've done anything wrong, or they don't see it how you see it, and those kind of things can be even more tricky to deal with.
I think as well, like you said about setting expectations up front, I think that lots of the time if conversations are preemptive, so we say to people at an earlier stage, haven't seen you for a week, were you okay? So you're not kind of slamming down on people, but just that is the expectation. And also intentionally positive communication, because youth and children's work's hard and you don't always get the positive feedback. But I don't do it very well probably, but I try and spot like actually and praise stuff as par for the course. Actually you're really good at this, or that particular situation, I overheard it and it sounded like it went really well. Just so that it's not all any time that someone says, is it all right, can we just have a quick chat, that didn't code for you've done a terrible job. But it's and again, hopefully that goes both ways. I'm terrible at taking praise as well. It's really awkward about it, but like allowing that space for people to hear praise and and criticism, and it's all a positive. I think it's really good.
Yeah, totally. And then I guess before we finish, it'd be good just to talk about the other side of it. We've both been volunteers as well as paid staff and team leaders of volunteers. So I guess how it might be good to share a bit about how we made the most of it and grew and thrived in those roles as volunteers.
For me, it was about remembering why I'm doing it. A bit like the person commented about, I needed, I want to get out in the evening and go to, because I took a year working for the uni, and during that year I volunteered with like 4 youth groups, which is probably way too many, but I had a real passion for the youth work still, and I loved being with the young people and everything when I was there. But that moment where you're like, I could just stay at home, hang out with my wife and watch a film, but instead we're opening our home up to this particular youth group, or I'm going off here to lead that, and actually what kept going was the vision. This is something that God's put on my heart. This is something that God's gifted me to do, and it's something that I think is important. The development of these young people and their faith journey is something I think is important, and if I can play a small part in supporting that, then that makes me want to be there. And about having those healthy parameters. It's not me. It doesn't all fall down to me. I am not the be all and end all to this ministry that God's running. And so it keeps it healthy. It's like, I want to go. And it's not like, I have to, because otherwise Jesus won't be able to, it's just about that healthy expectation of, there's some work I can do. It doesn't all revolve on me, but I love it and I want to be there. And I think that's important. If you're ever in the stage where you feel you're like just dredging yourself there because it's expected of you, or it's maybe it's time to reevaluate. Not necessarily, might be that God is still calling you there and there is still life to be gained there, or it could be that you've got into a rut and this, and it's better to stop if you just feel like you have to, and there's that would be my advice from experience of what I'm doing. What about you, Becky?
I think I'd say like you get out of volunteering what you put in. So like I think it's better not to look at it as like what's the bare minimum that we can give, but like actually commitment and consistency pays off. So like the more we're willing to be at something, at an activity, even if it's like I'm an introvert, so it always takes me longer to build relationships with people and to see the impact of that. And so I think in the past, like it's been sometimes where it's been up to me how much I'm involved with something, whether I'm there every week or once a month, whatever. Like sometimes I've had to force myself to be involved maybe slightly more than I would have been, because I know that it's going to pay off, because actually young people and children really appreciate that continuity and consistency, and actually that's when we see growth happen and we see God moving. And so like all of that obviously has to be balanced all the time with that work-life volunteering balance, but sometimes it's just being aware that actually sometimes we have to, and it costs us something, like to give up every Tuesday or to give up every other Tuesday or whatever it is to go and be at that activity. But when we do step out and we're willing to be obedient and be involved in these things, like we are allowing God to work through us in that situation. And actually that's where the magic happens, isn't it? Like when we're obedient to what God's asking us to do, we see him at work, and we see him working in people's lives. I think as well, the other thing I'd say is, like most people who end up in youth and kids ministry jobs, they start off as volunteers. And so at some point there has been, a wider calling to those people, like to me and to Ollie, to get involved with youth work as a job or as a career. And sometimes those only happen because we as individuals are open to that being a thing. And I think sometimes we can compartmentalize our lives and think, well, I just volunteer here and I give a couple of hours a week, but that's it. That's all I'm willing to do. And actually sometimes we have to be open to how God wants to use us in that situation. And actually sometimes that might be more than what we had planned. And so I guess the importance of being open to how God wants to use you in the situation, and not just limit that to our own expectations, but actually be open to how God wants to use us. And sometimes that might mean actually he wants you to do youth or kids ministry as a job, or take on more responsibility, or get out of your comfort zone and actually lead stuff rather than just assist with stuff. Or God wants each of us to grow as individuals and people just as much as he does through the roles that we do. So I think being open to what God wants to do is something I'd say about being on that other side of being a volunteer. So I guess before we finish, just to say, if you are a volunteer and you're struggling, or would appreciate talking to somebody, even if things are going great, we'd love to hear from you. Or if you're on the other side of it and you're running a team, or you're really struggling to recruit volunteers off the back of COVID pandemic and not sure where to start, or you want to start something new and you need to start from scratch with volunteers, or you've got a good team and you actually want to help cultivate them better, whatever it is, whatever your situation is, Youth Work Plus is here to support you. And so it would be a good opportunity to sort of just mention that at the end here. So get in contact with us.
Even practically speaking, if you want some bespoke training or something, we've done that sort of stuff before. So if you like, I'd really love to do training around with my team, and I find personally really helpful to get external people in to do training. Even if I could lead it myself, it's just much better to get an outside voice. So if you need that and want that, get in touch. We can kind of build that alongside with you.
Or if you want to know about other training courses that are out there that you want to go on, or want to take or recommend to your volunteers, then we can signpost some of those as well. Hopefully later this year we're going to be running our own Youth Work Essentials course for volunteers who are involved in youth or kids ministry, or want to start doing some youth ministry stuff. I'm sure we'll post on social media or our website when we've got more info about how to sign up for that, and it's going to be free, so everybody loves a freebie. I hope you've enjoyed listening to us today. Hopefully it's been useful, and at least something will stick out that actually you'll think, I can take that on board, and that'll be really useful for my context. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. It helps you and others find us on all the platforms. And thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye-bye. We'll see you next time.